Hey everyone, Eric with the Office of Stewardship with our Lunch and Learn for April. And we welcome Father Frank Coady. If you don't know him, you should because he does a marvelous job with our pastoral ministry formation classes here in the Diocese of Dodge City and Salina. So if you are familiar with those sessions, you are familiar with Father Frank, who's been a pastor for many years up in Manhattan and other places in the diocese. And he is going to share with us Pope Leo and the Poor. Father Frank, welcome. And where does this podcast find you today?
Well, I'm in Manhattan in my parish office, and we are in between. Well, I had a funeral this morning, but we are also in between all-day sessions with parishioners trying to establish a justice ministry for central Kansas. And so I have 45-minute interviews all day for the next 5 days. It's kind of exhausting, but it's also thrilling in the sense that uh, we identified 57 couples who were interested enough in justice to be willing to come and spend 45 minutes talking about what they can do. And I'm excited about that. Uh, and if we're establishing this ministry in central Kansas, literally it is from uh, Wamego, just east of Manhattan, down to Hutchinson.
Really?
And yeah, and if we're successful with this 8 county region, that's kind of a new idea because mostly it's just cities. Like Lawrence has one, Topeka has one, Wyandotte County has one, Johnson County has one, Wichita has one. So doing a bunch of smaller communities is a kind of a new idea, but I think it's going to go well. And if it does, then we're going to branch out farther west. So you might be hearing about it in the Great Bend, Hutchinson area, uh, and perhaps as far west as Dodge and Garden City.
So
So
is this
look for
kind
that
of
in the future.
is this born out of your your teaching about Pope Leo and the poor? Is this where this kind of originated, or how did this come about?
Um, Well, this is a national organization called DART, which stands for Direct Action Research Training. And it works on a cycle of listening, begins with listening, having sessions where you ask people, what are the issues in your community that keep you up at night worrying? And so rather than the top down saying, we think this is what you should be concerned about, we're asking people, what concerns you in your community? And then we identify, one or two issues that we actually think we could do something about. Then we establish a research team that researches what other cities of our size across the country have done with similar problems and how they financed it and those kinds of things. And then finally, we end up with a large conference of maybe 1,000 or more people, uh, and we invite uh, hospital administrators, sheriffs, city council members, legislators to come and listen to our solution that we're proposing. And then the next year we recycle and do that same process over and over again. And the idea is not just to do mercy, which is food banks and Catholic charities and those kinds of things, which are always going to be needed, but looking deeper at the causes of those injustices and how can we change some local structures so that we could alleviate some of that poverty. We're never going to alleviate all of it, but we could make our communities better places to live. And it's all based on the Bible, on the gospel.
Right, right.
So somebody approached me last summer and I got on board and I've been heavily involved with it ever since. But it's going to move out of my hands because it's really a lay run organization. Uh, they really reach out to clergy to get it started because we have that authority and mission and
Right.
everything. But eventually we hand it over to lay leadership, and that's another thing I like about this because it's not. the clergy doing it for you, but it's the clergy teaching you how to fish, teaching you how to do it yourselves. So it's an exciting thing.
Uh, That's pretty cool. Um, so you're going to be teaching, I forget, I regret I should have known this before this, but you're either going to teach or you've taught the class on Pope Leo and the poor, correct?
Yes, I taught that. Did you happen to catch that, Amy? Okay, good, because I was this would be a duplication then.
I had baseball that night I had to be at, so I tried to watch it, rewatch it, but yeah, I haven't been able to. Sorry.
Okay, that's all right. So you get it today. Um, yes, I taught that, and it went in a kind of a surprising way. Great discussion, and and I didn't even get through the material, which is totally okay. So have either of you read the Apostolic Exhortation to Lex Litae?
I've just read snippets of it
Okay.
or
So
summaries of.
okay. So I'm going to summarize what it says.
Please.
And and that's one of the reasons for doing these things. Then you don't have to read it yourself. You can have somebody tell you what it says. Okay. Um, First of all, Pope Francis wrote an exhortation on the poor, and then that was one of the last things that Pope Francis published. And so Leo wanted to kind of um, honor Pope Francis and say there's a consistency here. I think the same thing about the poor that he does. Uh, to give more credence to Francis's letter, but he also wanted to say, I have some of my own ideas that I want to add to this. And then we find out that he really, his experience in Latin America for over 20 years has given him a special predilection for the poor and a passion about this topic. And so he begins with Pope Francis, but then launches very much off onto his own. And so one of the points he makes over and over again is that uh, this is not just human kindness. The poor are a revelation. Okay, revelation is God revealing God's self. So, what Pope Leo is saying is that one of the ways that God chooses to reveal himself is through the poor. And when you think about it, Jesus was poor. He's born in a stable of uneducated, poor parents of the lower classes. He's an itinerant preacher, never making any more than he needed for one day. Nowhere to lay his head, dies a horrifying death on the cross. Uh, he's not only someone showing a God for the poor, but a God of the poor. And so the early church fathers, they picked up on that completely, and they saw the church as a church for the poor and a church of the poor. And that was a kind of a natural conclusion for them because the church was poor in the early days. It was a persecuted church, uh, undergoing all kinds of suffering, and so they identified with Jesus, identifying with them in their situation. But then the patristic period, moves forward into the imperial age when within a few decades the church becomes the state religion. And then they continue to preach that same message that just because we have found some kind of stature and affluence and influence doesn't mean that we should lose sight of our our forever mission of being a church of and for the poor. So um, if you leap forward to Vatican II, I wasn't so much aware of this until Leo pointed it out, but a lot of the council fathers, including John 23rd and Paul VI, uh, they saw Vatican II as very much a council about uh, the poor. And so Pope Paul VI, for example, says that the experience of the poor was at the very heart of the Second Vatican Council. And the parable of the Good Samaritan was sort of the motto, the thing that they kept going back to. And then Leo says that the poor, um, they're not there by chance or by fate, nor is poverty for most of them a choice. It's something that we're in danger of making this claim, and a lot of the people in our first world make this claim. I'll put it in sort of crude language. Well, God blesses some and not others. Some people are destined to be rich and some people are destined to be poor. Sorry about your luck, you know. Uh, and that's cruel. And yet that's the overarching philosophy that rules this first world identity that oh yeah, it's sad that there are people living in tin huts, living on top of each other without sanitation, without food security. That's sad. I wonder why God did that to them, you know. uh, and Leo is saying this has nothing to do with fate. It has to do with politics. It has to do with I you know power, that the powerful and wealthy of the world have forced others to suffer greatly so that they can have more. And so we talk about the one percenters, but let's think about the three percenters. We are the three percenters, middle class people living in the United States. I read somewhere 20 some years ago, I don't know what the statistics would be today, but the United States is less than 1% of the world's population, but it consumes 80% of the world's goods. That's what Pope Leo is talking about. This isn't fate. We're responsible for this. We did this, and we continue to do this. And not us personally. I mean, none of us has personal responsibility for this, but we have communal responsibility for this. It's what the church often now calls systemic sin or cultural sin. It's not something that I, as an individual, decided and a sin that I committed, but I am a colluder in the sense that I'm a citizen of a country that is this cruel, this selfish, this greedy. And while there's very little I can do about that, at the very least, my heart needs to ache about that. Not just, a compassionate thought every few months, but, daily. That I have to be somehow spiritually disturbed by this. And then to do what I can. And so contributing to the mercy agencies, contributing to Catholic Charities, to the food bank, to the homeless shelters, volunteering, giving alms. The early church fathers believed that almsgiving was a part of worship. That worship is somehow inauthentic without alms. So there's a reason that during Lent we're required three things: prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. Because the prayer and fasting are somewhat meaningless without the almsgiving, without that connection to the poor. And then Pope Leo goes through the church's history. and talks about various movements, various individuals who have developed this theology about the poor in very practical ways. So he starts. I mean, obviously, we talked about the church fathers, but he then moves on to the monastic tradition, and Saint Benedict and Saint Augustine and various communities. They lived out this mission that the poor are Christ, and so therefore you have to prayer and work, and both of them have to do with charity. Okay, in modern times, Thomas Merton, uh, in his book Conjectures of a Guilty Bystander, uh, he says, first of all, monks do not leave the world because they can't get along in the world, or that there's some kind of failures in the world or fearful of the world. They leave the world and go to a monastery to love the world, to love it through prayer, to be connected to it in a way that even the people living in the world often aren't. You know, uh, just because you're living in a marriage doesn't necessarily mean you're loving. You know, hopefully that's happening in most marriages, but not necessarily. You know, uh, just because you're part of a Christian community doesn't mean that you're a kind and loving person. These things aren't automatic; they're choices that you make every day. And so the monk who has left the world is is connected to the world on that deep, prayerful, contemplative level in a way that people living in the world are so busy they most of them don't really have the time to move to that contemplative level, or they don't have the training or the means, whatever. So the monk does that for them and with them. Uh, you know, St. Paul says in his letters to the churches, not everybody is a teacher, not everybody is a leader, not everybody is an interpreter of tongues. I mean, the body is made up of many parts, and so monasticism has a certain part to play, and it has played that through century after century. Um, and another thing I want to say about that is monasteries, they they left the world and went out to the wilderness. So monasteries, they get built up out in the countryside. But so often the the poor, the lower classes, moved out to the monastery because the monastery was taking care of them. The monastery was raising food and dispersing it among the poor. And so cities grew up around monasteries because monasteries weren't intended to be totally disconnected from the world, but actually connected in a way that had to do with charity and almsgiving, and certainly with contemplative prayer. So um, the monastic life, uh, it sees the stranger as Christ. Uh, one of my favorite stories is about the monk whose job it was to answer the door of the monastery. And after helping people all day long, late at night, the doorbell rings again, and he said, "Oh Lord Jesus, is it you again?" and and it is, you know. Um, One of the things I love about that story is it's not just monks, it's all of us. Um, just this morning, I had I was doing a little last minute preparation for this. I was setting up these meetings. I had that funeral, and I came over here to just check on a couple of things. And wouldn't you know, somebody caught me and and took 30 minutes of my time telling his story and wanting help, and and it's like there was part of me that said, "Oh, this isn't fair. This shouldn't be happening to me right now. I don't have the time for this." But I took the time, and you know, I I put the rest in God's hand. I don't know what is going to come of that, but it's just always there, isn't it? So throughout history, various religious orders have cropped up to try to live that gospel life in a more radical way than the world normally does, as a reminder to the world, um, but also in service to the world. And so, taking vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, living in community. During this Easter season, we're reading from the Acts of the Apostles and those inspiring but impossible stories about they shared everything in common. They sold what they had and gave it to the community, and no one was ever lacking for anything. Uh, and and we think, yeah, and I wonder how long that happened, you know, because it's so impractical, it's so idyllic, um, it's so kingdom. And so throughout history, religious communities have tried to respond to that in a more radical way by sharing all things in common. Uh, One of the examples in my life, I went to a high school seminary in Victoria, and and Father Schremer and Father Reggie Urban and we were all classmates in that small high school, and so it was taught by Capuchins, and Capuchins are a rather radical uh, branch of the Franciscan order. By radical, I mean they take poverty way more seriously than the other branches. Um, they absolutely own nothing. A couple of times I had a chance to see the cells where these friars lived, and there would be a small metal locker that had a couple of habits and a couple of pairs of blue jeans and some t-shirts and some sandals, and that was all they had. And they slept on the same uh, bunk, the twin army kind of cot things that we slept on in the dorm. And so the wristwatch that they had on their hand when they died, that was given to a younger friar. The rosary that was strung from their belt when they died, that was given to a younger friar. They just absolutely own nothing. And but I've rarely experienced such joy. And they were so hospitable. Uh, they had nothing to lose. And so that radical lifestyle has always been an inspiration to me. I was originally studying for the Capuchins, and happenstance, took me in a different direction. I ended up being diocesan, but my Capuchin roots are always kind of with me, um, and I'm happy for that. Um, Now, this isn't entirely kingdom either, because if you have any experience with religious communities, the communal life is not always perfect. It isn't in families either. Um, but it's the attempt, you know. I'm not sure that God is all that interested in success. He's interested in the attempt. Uh, he's interested in the journey that one day follows upon another, and we get closer and closer. And yeah, we go one step forward and two steps back, but in the long haul, are we making progress in the spiritual life? Are we making progress toward the kingdom, toward becoming Christ? Um, this is a little off topic, but here in the Salina Diocese, we are restoring the order of the sacraments of initiation so that we're getting back to baptism, then confirmation, then Eucharist. And I know that Dodge City investigated that 15 years ago, so you know what I'm talking about. And so basically, we're moving away from a model of preparation for sacraments toward a model of living sacraments. You know, when you got married, did you fully understand what marriage was? Well, obviously not. Uh, the grace of the sacrament was given to you on the first day of your marriage. We didn't wait till the 50th anniversary to celebrate it. Okay. We don't wait until a person is perfected in the spiritual life before we baptize them. We baptize them a few weeks after they're born. We put the grace first, and then we grow into what that's going to mean for us. Uh, Same with confirmation. Confirmation particularly, we have put this. Uh, we've put the emphasis on the wrong syllable. You know, uh, it's all about preparation. With 2 years of preparation, and you have to do a service project, and you have to choose a name, and you have to, uh, you know, jump through all these hoops and everything. And then, as if you were finally graduating, we honor you with the sacrament of confirmation. Uh, and we're moving it now down to the third grade with the idea we're just basically going to tell you what it is, but and then from the fourth grade on, we're going to teach you how to live it. Um, I think that's huge. And I think that it's instructive for all of Christian life that um, the sacrament of ordination didn't magically make me a priest. I have to choose to be a priest every day. Um, and I'm in my 50th year now. I know 50 times more now than what that sacrament entails. But I know that there's more in the future too. It that's why we talk about lifelong learning, not just educationally lifelong learning, but spiritually lifelong, growing into these sacraments, growing into cooperation with the grace. So, and then Pope Leo moves on to uh, lay movements. This is not just about monks and religious communities, but there have been amazing lay movements that have sought justice and dealt with the poor in radical ways that got them in trouble. You think of Dorothy Day, you think of Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King. There are Cesar Chavez, who is now disgraced because we found out some things about him we didn't know, but that doesn't uh, lessen the effect that farm labor movement had for thousands of people. And so Pope Leo is suggesting, don't sit around and wait for religious orders and monks to do this for you. This is the responsibility of everyone. When the Second Vatican Council emphasized the holiness of everyone, not just priests and nuns, that's one of the things that, if you're going to find holiness, Leo is pointing out, and he's quoting a number of different people in different ages and stuff like that. But what he's saying is, you really can't find holiness without finding the poor. If you don't touch the poor, you're not holy. Pretty simple, really. And yet it's kind of scary and radical. It points the finger at all of us, the ways in which we have ignored the poor or been afraid of the poor or kind of looked the other way, sought after our own advancement and sometimes at others' expense. We're all guilty. And he's not writing this letter to make us feel guilty, but to challenge us. And so he ends the letter with the challenge to live the gospel, to go back and reread the gospel. He says that our culture um, is it's idolatrous. It idolizes money and power. It idolizes greed, and 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 so many of our leaders, corporate leaders, political leaders, even sometimes religious leaders, have sort of standardized this and made this okay, you know, uh, as if there's nothing wrong with endless greed. Uh, there's nothing wrong with making the majority suffer so that a few can have more. And and then I would add to that personally. He doesn't say that, but I think he would agree with me that sometimes the poorest are the wealthiest because, so many of these billionaires, it's never enough. Uh, there's this deep pit of need in them that can't be satisfied. And so they have 8 billion and they think they can't really be secure until they have 10 billion. And then it has to be 12. It's never ending. It's like the person with a psychological they're a bottomless pit for affection because they have no self worth in them for whatever reason. And so many of the wealthiest people in the world, um, they're living in wanton luxury, but they're never satisfied because they have needs that money isn't going to satisfy. And so you take a poor priest like myself, and I don't consider myself poor. I consider myself rich, not in money, but look at the opportunities that life has led me. I had good parents, I have a pretty strong sense of self-worth. I have a fantastic education that the church provided. I have a roof over my head. I have food to eat. I have food security to the max, I have health insurance. Oh, what more do you need? Um, and do I have a big bank account? No. Um, but I think I'm endlessly richer than some of the billionaires. My life is richer, you know, and and I think and I've said this hundreds and hundreds of times. Priesthood has been so good for me and good to me. Uh, Being a priest has been my identity for 50 years, but not in a needy kind of way. Uh, I'm I consider myself a giver. I in the seminary there was a kind of a mantra that the professors were always telling us: you're ordained to serve. You're not ordained to be served or to be special. You're ordained to serve. I've always believed that. I've always done that. But you know how that works. The more you give, the more you receive. And so, I mean, I've just received so many blessings and benefits and friendships and cooperation. And, you know, I just wouldn't trade my life for any other life. Um, and I would wish that for everybody. Wherever your life is, whatever your calling, whatever your occupation, uh, that you would find dignity in what you do um, and be generous in sharing that, and the generosity will be fed back to you 100-fold. So that's basically what uh, the apostolic letter says. So I want to open it up to the two of you. Any comments, or as I was explaining that, what thoughts came to your mind?
Well, immediately I'm thinking about this tension of, like you say, I'm just, your generic middle class family man. And then, you see the poor, I have in my mind what the poor look like, but yet I go to work, I go home, you work out, you do the routine, and the poor seem quite distant from where I'm at. I mean, I know they exist. You see them on the corner at Walmart or discount store, whatever, looking for fuel or whatever they need. But yet that's not what I that's not where I need to be, right? I mean, what more does a guy like me, how do I connect to that in a more tangible aspect? Rather than just writing a check, I can do that all day long. I can write a check to Catholic Charities or whatever else. But what does it mean for just a guy sitting in a position like I do?
That's a tough question, Eric. I mean, it's one I ask myself a lot too. For one thing, in huge cities, there are wealthy suburbs and poor neighborhoods and stuff like that, and you really never see each other. But I find that to be true in small towns too.
Sure.
Um, you know, the poor in Manhattan don't live on the same side of town that I do in my parish here. Um, so it's difficult to contact them. You can't just go down to that part of town and walk the street and say, "Hey, I want to talk to you." What do you need? Uh, Obviously, that's kind of silly. So for me, um, there's only one example that comes to my mind immediately for me, and that is um, there is a kind of a ministry that's shared by all the churches in Manhattan uh, called Common Table, and they serve uh, dinner every night of the week, and different parishes take turns uh, preparing the food, bringing it to to a certain kitchen, and then serving it. And so every once in a while, I go with different parishioners of mine and serve that meal. Um, and even though I've done that fairly often, I often get surprised. It's like some of these people are really weird and and kind of disturbing. And one evening, a fight broke out between two of them, and we had to separate these guys. And I thought, what is the deal here? Um, but they're coming with their issues, and poverty is a complex thing. It's not just about the lack of money. It's about the lack of self-esteem. It's about the lack of family of origin. Uh, it's about the deep-seated anger about life circumstances that they may not be consciously aware of, but it can be triggered and they can get into a fight over it. Um, and and Jesus says, "Blessed are the poor," but he doesn't necessarily mean that they're all good. You know,
That's true.
you know. Um, so anyway, that's just a rubber meets the road kind of real contact that I rarely have, but I have had it a few times. And then also, uh, every parish has what we call a door ministry. People just showing up at the door, like the guy showed up this morning. And of course, we're all busy, and so our temptation is, say, I don't want to hear your sad story. Just let me write you a check. But it's the sad story that is maybe even more important than the money, to say, well, sit down. I have time. I'll give you time to tell me your story. And some of those stories are made up, and some of them are shysters. Okay, fine. Um, but I learned a long time ago that if you're only worried about vetting them, whether their story is true or not, you're going to end up, um, you know, not giving away much money, but cheating somebody who really did need it. If you're going to be generous, you're going to get taken now and then, and that's part of the game. And so don't worry about that. uh, Let God sort that out. I'm not encouraging people to be stupid, but
Right.
at the same time, uh, there's an excessive kind of, when priests get together, sometimes they get to telling stories about how they figured a guy out. Uh, and so they didn't waste any money on him. And it's like, okay, fine, but is that a success story? I don't know. Um, did I answer your question at all, Eric?
Oh, I think it's just one of those things that I just have to sit with and kind of let it come out. The whole vetting thing brought to mind, the people on the corner, you say, I need gas and whatever. And like you said, some of them are legit, some of them aren't. And occasionally I'll hand them, some money or I won't. And then people say, they're just going to buy liquor and cigarettes with it. And I'm like, well, I like to have a beer once in a while.
Yeah, yeah.
What's so wrong? If you're going to stand out there for 12 hours in the heat or the rain or the cold with a sign, I'd probably want to have a drink at the end of the day too. Might even, if I smoked, I'd probably have a cigarette or whatever. But
Mhm.
what they do with that is on them, and what I do with it is on me.
Yeah,
And that's kind of the way I roll with that.
yeah, I agree. You know, uh, Years ago, I studied in Rome, and I, I had a good friend. We're still friends. He's a priest of the Newark, New Jersey diocese, and he teaches scripture at Seton Hall University. And uh, and Anthony actually was born in Italy, and his parents immigrated to New Jersey when he was 5. And within a year, his father died, and his mother then she had 5 children, and she worked in a factory all her life to raise those children. They never had much money, and um, and Anthony and I would be walking down the street, and I never in Rome you have these people lying on the street all over the place, begging for handouts. I don't remember us ever passing by anybody like that without him pulling out a little bit of money. Uh, and I probably had more disposable money than he did, but he just never didn't ask questions. And he spoke fluent Italian. He could have vetted them if he wanted to. He just gave them the money.
Hmm.
That was kind of an inspiration to me.
Hmm. Amy, I'd invite you if you have a question before we wrap up here.
Oh, I just really appreciate you taking the time, Father Frank. I need reminders that, the poor are a revelation and it is Jesus, because I'm here in the church often by myself and we are along a highway and our doors are unlocked, and sometimes I get kind of like, what happens if someone comes in here and asks for something? And I need those reminders because I shouldn't be thinking that way. Eric, take this out of the recording. But I need that reminder, like it's okay. And I do have people come in my office, and a lot of times it's right when I'm getting ready to leave.
Yeah,
And it just happens, that's how it happens. And I will sit here and I will listen, and I notice that their demeanor and their day has changed. They just needed someone to listen to them.
yeah,
And so I needed this little reminder because I was vacuuming the church Saturday night and thinking, oh, it's kind of getting dark out, and but I need to just remember that not to judge, and that's Jesus, coming to us. And yeah, the church doors need to be open, and I need to be more present here and available to those. So thank you, Father Frank. And Saint Dominic has a Saint Vincent de Paul group. Have you heard
okay.
about that at all?
I
It's
have, yeah.
it's starting up with Father Ben, and they're kind of going more into the root causes of
Mhm.
why they are in the position they're at. So they have a pretty good group there, I think. And so whenever you mention that about your justice ministry, I think I think the church is moving in a good direction. And I appreciate your take today because those documents are long, some of them, and they go over my head. So I need this, as you know, me being your student, I need the more easier wording and things. So
You need the Cliff Notes.
yes, yeah. So
Yeah,
thank you.
you're welcome. And thanks for doing this, Eric.
You're welcome. Thank you. And I appreciate at the beginning where you said, trying is underrated. That, working toward better and not perfection. We can't be perfect, but doggone it, we can at least give our best effort to become who we're supposed to be. And that is so undervalued today.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I appreciate hearing that. If you had one book we should read, what would it be?
Oh, wow. One book. Uh,
Or your favorite book in the last 12 months?
my favorite book in the last 12 months was by Gerhard Lofink. Have you heard of him?
I can't say I have.
Okay. He died this year. He was a German scripture scholar, and he's written a number of books. Of course, he writes in German, but they're translated into English, thank God.
Hmm?
And I just find him to be a really lucid writer, easy to read, and a number of us have become sort of fans. And I would say one of my favorites of his is Does God Need the Church? And our immediate thought is, well, obviously God doesn't need the church, but he argues that he does for really wonderful reasons that I would not have thought of. Um, Starting out with the Old Testament, the whole notion of Israel as a community, as a family of God, and as Israel married to God, so that God's relationship with the human community has always been communal. And of course, one of the reasons I love that book and that whole idea is that um, in our modern world, particularly in the West, where individualism is so highly prized and has gotten so off track, uh, we need the church more than ever. And you may be aware that in the last couple of years, there's been this big resurgence of interest in the Catholic Church. People coming back to church, people finding the church for the first time,
Right?
and that has been more with the Catholic Church than with the Protestant churches. Uh, and so I've been thinking, so why is that? Why wouldn't they be enjoying the same resurgence that we are? And the best answer I can come up with is it's about community. People are recognizing that this individual me and Jesus thing hasn't worked for me and my family. Uh, that I need the community, and of course I've been saying that for years. I totally believe that, but for some reason or other, Gen Z um, is finding that to be true more than the previous generations have. And one of the explanations I've read is that in a generation that has grown up with endless possibilities, but nowhere to focus, you know, they haven't been denied anything. So they're not really grounded in anything. I grew up with the Baltimore Catechism and this very almost severe kind of, this is the way it is. And then, so I had this solid foundation. And then when Vatican II came along and we could go out swinging on the edge of the branch and trying out new theologies and new ways of being Christian and everything like that, I just found that thrilling. They find that frightening beyond belief. They can't go there. So they're diving to the roots because they don't have a security. They don't have that foundation. And there's something about the Catholic Church that offers them that firm foundation. So and he argues something similar in that book. So that'd be a good read, I think.
Fabulous. I'll certainly pick that one up. That
Okay.
sounds very good. Father
Okay.
Frank, thank you for your time. Amy, thank you for joining us, and we'll look forward to the next one. And
All right.
if you'd want more of Father Frank, you want to go to Pastoral Ministry Formation on the DC Diocese website, sign up for classes there. You can get more, you can either get personal enrichment or college credit. So if you like what you heard today, be aware that watch the schedule there for more classes by Father Frank. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. God bless.
See
Thank
ya.
you, Father. Thank you, Eric. Have a good day.
All right, guys. Appreciate it. Father Frank, have a great day. Best wishes on the rest of your interviews.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Eric.
Yeah, hope it goes where you want it to.
I'm sure it will.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right, cheers.
Thank
Bye.
you.